Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am half of the VHS twins. My name is Connie, and I do the crime topics, and my brother usually joins me for more scary movie topics. But I am joined by Max. He's a little grumpy today. You can also find me on Instagram. Our handle is VHS Twins Official. And let's get into it. So today's case is about a man who is currently on trial. The trial might wrap up in February or March, depending on how much more they have left. But it is the case of Brian Patrick Miller. He is known as the Zombie Hunter or the Phoenix Canal Murderer. So this takes place in Phoenix, Arizona, obviously. Most of the victims' bodies were found in or near the Phoenix Canal. So the first victim, her name was Angela Brasso. We don't know if this is the first victim of Brian's. It could be he had a history before this, but this is the first known murder that he committed. Angela was born in 1970 in Pennsylvania. She went to Cedar Cliff High School. At the time of her murder, she was living with her boyfriend, Joe. Before she moved in with her boyfriend, she was a student at DeVry Institution of Technology in Los Angeles, California. So her and Joe's apartment was near I-17 off of Cactus Road. So that day, it was just a normal Sunday. The next day was actually Angela's birthday. Her and her boyfriend loved to ride bikes. They had a bike trail near their apartment. So Angela wanted to go on their normal bike ride, but Joe stayed back to make her birthday cake. He expected her home by 8 because every Sunday they would watch In Living Color, which started at 8. So after about 4.5 hours, Angela was still not home. So Joe reported her missing. He did try to go look for her, but he obviously failed to find her. He said he tried 3 times, and every attempt failed in finding her. Unfortunately, by the morning time, he woke up to watching the news, and the helicopter footage showed her body being deceased. Angela was found in Park South of Cactus Road. She was headless. Her abdomen and chest were cut open. Her bike, which was a 21-speed Diamondback Mountain, was also missing. And when I first heard this, I was like, it was definitely not a robbery. I think he took her bike more of out of a trophy than a robbery, because if someone were to rob somebody, usually beheading them is not typically what they do. And detectives thought that this was a work of someone who might have had experience with medicine, maybe was a surgeon, or someone who was in the military field. The medical examiner said that the stab wound on her back is initially what killed her. It was believed that she was sexually assaulted. And on November 20th, her head was found 20 miles south in the stretch of the Arizona Canal near the Metro Center Mall. Unfortunately, there wasn't much the detectives could go off at the crime scene, so the case was cold up until 10 months later when another body was found. And this body was Melanie Bernas, who was only 17 at the time. So Melanie was born on September 14th in 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona. She was still in high school at Arcadia High School, and she was a junior. So Melanie went for a bike ride on September 22nd, 1993, and unfortunately her body was found. A woman by the name Charlotte, her sister, and their kids found a bloody drag marks on a bike trail. They didn't find her body, but they obviously see this drag mark across a bike trail leading down to the canal. And so they called police, and that's when the police found her body in the bottom of the canal. She was stabbed in the back, and she had a cross carved in her chest with the initials WSC. Her clothes were gone, and she was wearing a turquoise bodysuit that did not belong to her. So the killer obviously was dressing her up for some sick fetish. I don't even know. Melanie's head was not decapitated, but her bike was missing. So again, a trophy was taken from the crime scene. And I found a quote from the pastor at Melanie's funeral. For her eulogy, he said, "Melanie would tell you not to hold any bitterness, not to be captured by bitterness." And I thought that was a nice quote. It says a lot about who she was. But not my ass. My ass would not be forgiving, and I would definitely be bitter. But that's just me. So Angela and Melanie's case obviously went cold up until 2014, when Miller became a suspect after forensic genealogists ran the DNA sample found on victims' bodies against public ancestry database and came up with the surname Miller. So both victims were believed to be sexually assaulted, so he left his semen on their bodies, in their bodies. I don't know where they got his semen, but obviously he left it at the crime scene. So genealogists have been so crucial in solving cold cases because we do the 23andMe, and everybody in there wants to find out about their ancestors and the blood, and it solved many, many cold cases. When they ran the semen DNA, it came up with the family name Miller. That's how he became a suspect. So police got his DNA from a clear plastic mug left at a restaurant because obviously he thinks he's got away with it. So why would he not take everything he throws away and keeps it? So they couldn't test his DNA. But eventually in 2015, he was arrested. And that's when they had a search warrant for his house. Now, when they went into this creep's house, they found disturbing images. I mean, women being mutilated and tortured and stabbed. The house was described as a hoarding house, so it was disgusting. You could barely get through it. There was hunting knives, steak knives, keychains, Hot Wheels, cassette tapes, movies. So they're pretty much just trying to find anything that ties him to the murders. Brian Patrick Miller has been suspect in other murders because of this, because it's such a big gap, and usually serial killers, they don't stop. So it was a big gap. It's about 20 years, more than 20 years. So obviously they're going to look into cases that haven't been solved to see if he's connected to any other murders. So who is Brian Patrick Miller? He was known around the valley as the zombie hunter because he would ride around in a vintage police car, spray painted with blood, with a bumper sticker that says zombie hunter. He would wear a trench coat and wear a gas mask, and he always had a fake gun with him. And I think there was a fake dummy zombie in the back seat. But he was really into cosplay and Renaissance fairs, so I'm not dogging him for that. He would even take pictures with strangers and police officers with his car because it was kind of cool looking, I guess. So it turns out he had a juvenile record for violently attacking a teenage girl. In 1989, he was arrested for stabbing a woman in a mall parking lot, apparently for no reason. So he was sent to a juvenile detention until he was 18. In 2002, he was currently living in Washington State, and he was acquitted for stabbing a woman because he said he was trying to rob her. Obviously, that was not the case. Melissa Ramirez went walking. She accepted a ride from a man. She said she recognized him from the apartment complex. That's when he took her to work and stabbed her with a 12-inch knife. And he moved there in 1998, so after the murders. And before this, it was said that he lived in Hawaii for a little bit. And it's believed from after the murder of Melanie, he fled to Hawaii and Washington up until he moved back to Phoenix, Arizona. And the reason why his DNA wasn't in the system is because he was exonerated for stabbing a woman, which is crazy. So Brian Miller was born October 24th, 1972 in Trenton, Michigan. His father did pass away. I don't know when he passed away, but he lives with his mother, obviously, and her name was Ellen. Ellen was allegedly very abusive physically, emotionally, mentally. At one point, it is alleged that she tried to cut off his penis. Brian is on the spectrum. He has autism. He also has PTSD and hoarding and associating disorder. I think that's what it is. He did have a wife named Amy, but they divorced in 2006, and they shared a daughter. I couldn't find much information on them, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't include it because I'm sure they're already going through enough. So Brian was pretty much seemed like a normal guy. He was an Amazon driver by day and then zombie hunter dude by night. He found Comic-Con, zombie walks, Renaissance fairs very therapeutic. The house he was living in, he was renting it from a church member. He was said to be attending church before he was arrested. I think there was a period shortly before he was arrested that he stopped going. I believe that a church member would take his daughter to Sunday school. His ex-wife claims that Brian and her would dabble into some bondage, but it went south very quick. She said that the sex would get out of hand. He would put knives to her neck, threaten her. She also alleges that his mother provided them with a sexual diary. I don't really know what that entails. I don't know if it was like, keep track of how much you have sex. And allegedly, that his mom would have VHS tapes of violent porn playing when he was a kid. This is all alleged, but it possibly could go true. When he was arrested, I think one of the first things he talked about was how abusive his mom was. His mom also found a document. She brought it into the police because she said it was very terrifying in the early 1990s. She found this plan that Brian wrote detailing kidnapping, sexually assaulting, mutilating, and killing a 17-year-old woman. Now that Brian is arrested, it's 2015. He's being charged with the murder of Angela and Melanie. But before them, in 1992, a little girl named Brandy Myers disappeared. So Brandy Myers was born March 13th, 1979. She had a sister named Kristen that was 2 years younger than her. And in May of 1992, Brandy disappeared while walking in her Sunny Slope neighborhood. So that day, the two girls were being watched by their babysitter. In an interview later on, Kristen said that the babysitter was into drugs. Obviously, she didn't know that at the time. So that day, Brandy really wanted to collect pledges for school for a readathon. The big prize was a visit to the zoo. So she asked her sister for help going door to door to collect these pledges. But her sister stayed back, and they lived in an apartment complex, so she could see her sister from the balcony, and she said her sister turned a corner, and that was the last time she ever saw her sister. So Brandy did have a learning disability, and later on, Brian's ex-wife Amy, alleges that he confessed to her murder, Brandy's murder. He said that I shouldn't say little girl, she's 13. But he describes that a little girl came to the door, he brought her in, violently stabbed her, chopped her up, put her in the trash can before trash day, and that this girl fit Brandy's description. There are so many reasons why the ex-wife probably didn't come forward. She was probably scared. I haven't read for what her reasoning was, why she didn't contact the police. She also says that Brian confessed to an attack in Everett, Washington when they lived there. Sorry, Max keeps shaking the under table, so it's a little shaky. It's Max. So Brandy was last seen at the corner of 10th and Hatcher Street. Miller lived 3 blocks from their apartment and 1 block from their school. So his house was very close to where she was trying to collect these pledges. So it's believed that she knocked on his door and he took her in and killed her. There was a lead when a little girl that lived in the apartment complex with him said that that day her and Brandy went to a convenience store. The girl had to use the bathroom, so Brandy waited outside, and when she came back, Brandy was gone. However, the police found this lead to not go anywhere. Brandy's sister said that she doesn't believe this is the case. Brandy would never go there. And she said that she saw Brandy walking the other direction. They thought they found Brandy 2 days after she went missing. There was a body of a 16-year-old girl that was found, but it ended up obviously not being Brandy. The body belonged to Shannon Almack. She was a runaway. I think she was an orphan, but I don't think her case has been solved. Allegedly, they think this is also a victim of Brian Miller's because of the distance of everything. So another one of Brian's potential victims is Victoria Michelson. In October 2002, she was a high schooler. She was walking, I think she was walking to school along the bike trail. She was stabbed walking, obviously, on the bike trail. She lived, and for years she didn't know who her attacker was, until police came to her years later and said that they believed this is who her attacker was Brian Patrick Miller, because he lived in the same apartment complex at the same time. And now Victoria believes that that's who her attacker is. So up to date, Brian Patrick Miller, his trial started in October of last year, so 2022. It is a bench trial, so they waived the jury, so the judge will ultimately make the decision of his fate, I guess. So at first, his defense team is trying to say that he is mentally unstable to stand trial, but it was found that he was mentally fit to stand trial. So his defense team is trying to is not saying he didn't commit the crimes, because obviously his DNA was found at the crime scene. So they're pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. So yes, he did commit these murders, but he wasn't sane at the time. They brought in experts to conclude that Brian suffers from dissociative amnesia, so that he blacks out during the crimes. Trial is still going on. They believe it's going up until March. But the possibilities that the judge can conclude is for him to go to a mental facility, spend life in prison, or being sentenced to death, because he is up for the death penalty. But yes, Brian Patrick Miller will be known as the Phoenix Canal murderer and the zombie hunter. I believe he has more victims out there. So my thing stopped recording. I cannot wait to get more of a better setup where I am getting a new camera soon. So none of this webcam stuff, and I don't know why, it just keeps pausing when I'm trying to talk. But yes, I'm getting new stuff within the month, so I'm so excited for that. I think there is more victims out there. There's no way that he couldn't have committed more murders. I feel really awful. I mean, Angela was murdered the day before her birthday. I mean, being murdered in general, no matter what day, is horrible. And Melanie was still in high school. I read a newspaper clipping about her funeral. She had 2 sisters, 2 brothers who were just obviously heartbroken that their sister was killed like this. And then Brandy Myers, she was just so young, and she seemed like she had her whole future in front of her, and that her family will never, I mean, there's still hope, but will never retrieve her body for a proper burial. And I first saw this, I heard about this case on the People Investigates. I was just flipping through the channel and I saw Brandy's sister, Kirsten. She was giving an interview, and I was like so heartbroken because her sister feels so guilty for not going with her that day. But her sister she did see her walk down towards Brian Street, so that could hopefully help Brian get charged with Brandy's murder, but unfortunately they don't think there's enough evidence to convict him. So in this episode that I watched of the People Investigates, they believe Brian's potential last victim could have been Adrienne Salinas. I'm probably saying that wrong. Her body was found in an area that Brian said he would be for a biking thing for, I think, his birthday. And she went to a party that was in Brian's neighborhood and that he would drive around in his zombie car. But unfortunately, again, there's not enough evidence to charge him with the murder. I'm gonna look more into her case to see any updates or if there was any other leads with it. But yeah, we're just waiting for a conviction of Brian. I could see it going. I could see the judge giving him the death penalty, or, I mean, he was found mentally stable, mentally sane to fit trial. Maybe because he is diagnosed with many things that he could go to a mental facility. But it's ultimately up to the judge. But I appreciate you guys sticking around. Leave a comment if you want me to do a certain case. Give us a follow on Instagram. But that is it for us today. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you soon.